that's one example of problem ownership. Let your kids own their own problem, unless it's dangerous. If they are fighting to the point where you have to drive to the hospital, you do step in. But believe it or not, that doesn't happen. It happens much less often once they see it's not important to you. Okay? You own the problem when somebody is bothering you. You're having a problem at work, your child is bothering you, a friend is bothering you, your spouse, your mother-in-law, something, your boss, okay? Then you own the problem. And you do have to take action. And in this course, for the sake of this course, we're interested in when a child bothers you. Okay, let's say you're sitting quietly, reading a book, child walks in and turns on the TV full blast. That is your problem because the child bothered you. Okay, then you do have to take action. And we'll talk about what to do when we get down to the iMessages, which are what I said before replaces criticism. If it is something dangerous, however, for example, let's say a 4-year-old running in the street, purely the problem is between the 4-year-old and that car that might come. No. When it's something dangerous, it becomes your problem. And then you go, first of all, you go screaming out of the house. You usually don't scream and step, but in this case you scream. And then once you've calmed down, you use the techniques in STEP to help train the child not to run out in the street. Okay, and that's iMessages and consequences, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Okay. We're going to go on to communication. Another concept in this course is how to communicate effectively with your children. Listening is the first thing that's worked on. This is so crucial. Every time I hear about a teenage suicide, I wonder whether that child would have been saved if somebody in his life had learned about this. If there was some person in that child's life who that child could have confided in. Usually adults just listen to children long enough to see, are you done? So I can tell you what I think. But this teaches you how to really listen, so the child really feels you're interested in what he or she is saying. What you do is the child comes to you and they own the problem. They're upset about something. They own the problem. They come to you and you say something that makes them feel that you're trying to understand how they feel. Okay, it could be something very unimportant to you. You don't think it's a big problem that the child's doll broke. Okay, and the child comes crying. And you say something like, wow, you seem to be worried about your doll. Okay? They see that you're trying to understand how they feel. You may think to yourself, that's nothing. I'm worried about paying the bills at the end of the week. But the child feels understood. Lots of parents automatically would take that problem on their shoulders. Here, let me fix it. Or here, I'll buy you a new one. Let the child own that problem. This is great preparation for adulthood. If you automatically take all the problems on your shoulders, they won't know how to solve problems. Okay? She may end up spending the afternoon playing doll hospital. And the end result may be that she comes and asks you to fix it. But at that point, don't automatically take the problem off her shoulders. Just do the empathy, the listening. Okay? Exploring alternatives is what you do when the child seems to need help solving a problem. Okay, so she comes to you with her broken doll, and the first thing you do is say something like, which we learned with the listening chapter, something like, you seem to be worried about your doll. And then you see that she doesn't want to go play doll hospital. She does want help solving her problem. So then you say, the exploring alternatives is really helping them solve their own problems by saying something like, what do you think you could do? And she may say, can you fix it? That could be one solution. You try to get a number of solutions and let her pick one. Okay? You could fix it, you could buy me a new one, I could glue it. See if she can come up with a number of solutions. She's learning how to solve her own problems. You won't always be there. And definitely as an adult, you won't always be there. So then she learns. That's exploring alternatives. Okay. When you own the problem, when the child is thwarting you, we finally got to iMessages. When you own the problem, this is what you use. Child is bothering you, or anybody's bothering you. This is useful anywhere. As Susan said when she was introducing herself, these concepts work with anyone. In fact, the authors have a course for couples. They have a course for teachers. They have courses for all kinds of different relationships. I believe that they're coming out with an employee-employer course. Okay, iMessages are a way to let your child know that she's bothering you, or to let anybody know that. I'm going to give an example with the tape of what it feels like not to have an iMessage. Okay? Imagine that you're relaxing in your neighbor's house, and your neighbor says this.
Hurry up and finish your coffee. I have an appointment, and you're making me late.
Okay, how did that feel? Anybody?
She didn't come.
You wish you didn't come, okay? You're not sure you want to visit that neighbor again, okay? And yet, we're willing to talk to kids that way. Okay, what should the neighbor have said instead? The neighbor's nervous about this appointment coming up. What should the neighbor have said instead? Instead of, hurry up and finish your coffee, I have an appointment and you're making me late. Renee?
I'm on my way out the door to an appointment. Could you hurry, or at least in a nice tone of voice?
Okay. Tone of voice is everything in this course. Tone of voice is crucial. I'm sorry, I have an appointment, I have to rush, so we'll have to do this another day, something like that. That's the idea of iMessages. iMessages are a way to let the child know that you need something, that they're bothering you, but in a way that's not an attack. Okay? Going back to what we talked about with problem ownership, where the child comes into the room and you're reading quietly and the child turns the TV up full blast. Rather than saying, how inconsiderate, don't you see me here? What's the matter with you? And notice how many times the word you is in there. You would say, an iMessage talks about why I'm having a problem, rather than attacking the child, criticizing the child. You would say something like, with all the noise, I'm having trouble concentrating on my reading. Okay? It doesn't attack the child at all. It doesn't even use the word I. The child is much more doesn't even use the word you, you're right. The child is much more likely to be willing to comply when the child doesn't feel attacked. Okay, you're going to learn how to do that. We spend a whole session on how to do iMessages. And as I said before, that'll help you with everybody. When you want to let a coworker know, or a friend know, or a boss know, or a spouse know that you're having a problem, you're much better off saying, I'm having a problem, rather than what's the matter with you. Okay. We're down to 7, reward and punishment versus encouragement and consequences. This course does not believe in reward and punishment. And that's very basic in our society. What replaces reward is something called encouragement. What replaces punishment is something called consequences. Okay, the reason the course does not believe in reward and punishment is because in the long run they do not work. In the short run they do work, but they keep having to get bigger and bigger and bigger to impress the child. Also, we have to be like puppeteers, meting out the rewards and punishments and controlling the child. And what happens is, what if we're not there? We're not there. I was walking down a street where there was a boy I knew, and he was going down. He lived on a very steep street, and he was going down the middle of his street in a soapbox. And there was a very busy street at the bottom. And I said, do you think that's a good idea? And he said, my mother's not home. As if my mother's not home to control me. He had no internal controls to tell him that wasn't a good idea. And the idea behind not using reward and punishment, but using encouragement and consequences instead, is so that your children will become self-disciplined. They'll choose to do the right thing even when nobody's there, approving or disapproving, which is what happens with reward and punishment. If they're tied up in other people's approval or disapproval, which is what you get with reward and punishment, then you can get something like this. A child, let's say 5th grader, walks in the bathroom and friends of his are smoking a cigarette. Because he's been brought up with approval and disapproval, out of want of approval and fear of disapproval, he'll have to do it. He doesn't have any internal strength, internal self-discipline, internal control to say, no, this isn't good for me. Okay? Reward and encouragement are just slightly different. Instead of the approval with reward, for example, saying, I'm proud of you, encouragement would be, are you proud of yourself? And you say it with the same amount of enthusiasm, the same amount of time. And it seems like it's very slightly different, but it makes all the difference. If the child feels good about herself, if she feels proud or good, you say, do you feel good about that, rather than, I think you're good. Okay? Say, do you feel good about it? Then even if she's mad at you, let's say she's a teenager and her hormones are raging, if she realized she did that and made her feel good or proud, she'll continue to do it. Okay? With punishment and consequences, the difference is punishment is often harsh, and it's often not related to the misbehavior. So what ends up happening is when you punish the child, what happens is they're mad at you for doing it, they want to get revenge, and they also see, ooh, this was a good button. Because going back to the children misbehave because they're discouraged, if the child is discouraged, they'd rather have that negative reaction to no reaction. So when you punish them, you say, you came in late, so no TV or something like that. They, rather than thinking, oh, I've got to come in on time because I want to watch TV, they think, ooh, that was a good button, I'll do something like this again. Even though they're hurting themselves, they'd rather have that negative reaction to no reaction. Consequences are more logically related to what they did. And when we do things wrong, usually logical things happen to us. So if the child came in late for dinner, the logical consequence would be they missed a hot dinner, they may have to go fend for themselves, they missed the attention at the table, and any discussion, and they missed the big negative response they expected. When they walk in, you say, hi, I was worried about you, rather than no TV. And they realize, gee, maybe I'll come in on time tomorrow night because I missed all these things. Okay, that's the end of the overview. What I'd like to do now is ask if anybody has any questions. Julie?
Do you ever yell at your children?
Okay, do I ever yell at my children? Unfortunately, yes. Even though I've taught this course 60-some times, I do sometimes yell at my children. Going back to the good parent versus the responsible parent and the perfectionism, I'm human and I can't be perfect. I'd like to be. What happens is I don't yell at them when they're misbehaving. I yell at them when I'm having a hard day, when I'm under a lot of pressure, and I go back and apologize to them afterwards. But in this course, what you find is percentages. Let's say now when you come to your first class, you feel that you're patient 20% of the time and impatient 80% of the time. 80% of the time you're yelling and threatening and bribing, and then 20% of the time you're able to keep that in check. Hopefully the percentages will change until by the end of the course maybe you've turned it around, and it's only the exception, maybe 20% of the time, that you're impatient. And that's the case with me. It's only when I have company coming, like tonight when you guys are coming, and cases like that where I'm under a lot of pressure, that I end up yelling at whoever's in the way. And then I go back and apologize to them. But they know before a big holiday, that's the time that I'm the most tense. With them, when they misbehave, now that I understand what they're doing, if they misbehave, I actually have trouble not laughing because I don't take it personally anymore, and that's what will happen with you. Okay, anything else? Renee?
I have a comment that I'd like to make, and then I would like to ask a question. I looked around a lot of places for something like this, and whenever I approached the county that I live in and the school system and asked for a program that dealt with what you've outlined for us this evening, I was referred to basic and remedial parenting and diaper changing and nutrition and programs for teenage parents and things that were not appropriate for what I was looking for. And so this is wonderful that you have offered this. I have a question regarding the good parent versus the responsible parent. What if I'm coming to class looking to be a responsible parent and the other parent at home is continuing to use good parent skills rather than, maybe inconsistent kind of disciplinary action?
Okay.
How could I deal with that?
Okay. The only person you can change is you. And I think what you're asking is that hard on your kids, that inconsistency between you and another person, in this case your spouse? What's hard on kids is if within one person they never know what to expect. One minute you're autocratic, the next minute you're permissive, the next minute you're democratic. That's what's hard on them. They can understand that every separate person has different buttons and different limits and different styles. As long as they know this person's always that way. Okay? Anybody else? Kathy?
This seems like this is going to be really hard to do.
Okay.
I don't know if I can do it.
All right. Anything new is hard. Anything new you learn how to drive a car, you learn a new serve in tennis. You learn a new serve in tennis, you have to think about every step, about the serve and the follow through and where the ball is and all that. And then after a while, you don't have to think anymore. And that's the case with anything new, including this. While you're learning it, you have to stop and think. But after a while, you don't have to think about it anymore. It becomes part of you, kind of like learning a new language. When you learn a new language, at first you have to stop and think, okay, how do I conjugate that verb? And then after a while, you can think in that language. And that's what happens with this. And I guess the question I have to ask you is, are you happy with the way things are now?
No.
Okay.
I'm not happy yelling and
Yeah.
and threatening to spank them all day. It doesn't seem like it's working.
Mm-hmm. If you're not happy with the way things are now, then maybe it's worth the effort. I find that this is one problem I don't have. My relationship with my kids is one problem I don't have. It's just, I look forward to coming home. I know so many people who tell me they go to work to get a rest. My favorite place to be is with my kids because it's not stressful at all. And that's, I would love everybody to have that. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Rich?
Most of the students I work with are going to spend the majority of their time dealing with people who have not had any step training or even any knowledge of what kind of effect will that have on them.
Okay. The rest of the world, you're right. Most of the rest of the world doesn't do this. And it's unfortunate. I hope it's going to become more common. It seems to me by the number of articles I see and things like that, this is becoming, this type of parenting, maybe not the specific course only, but this type of parenting or handling kids in a school situation is more common. However, let's say you're the only person that child knows who is empathetic, doing the listening, who's encouraging, and all that. Does that hurt the child? I think you're asking, is it inconsistent, and does it hurt the child that one person in their lives is doing this, not judging them, which is what you do with the approval, the reward. I think that is such a relief for them. I think at least there's one significant person in their lives who they know is a haven, who's positive with them. And I find that with my kids. My kids in school and in camp and in other situations, don't have the same warmth and positive response that they get at home, they're able to handle it better, I think, because they know there is somebody who they can be themselves with and confide in and be comfortable with. Okay, any other questions? Okay, next week we'll start going into each thing in depth. What I want to ask you this week is, don't try this at home until you know the whole picture. This is just a taste of what we'll be doing, and you really need to understand each concept in depth before you can carry it out. And it's called systematic training for effective parenting because each skill is built on skills you learned in previous classes. But by the end, you'll have the whole picture and you'll be able to do it. Thank you all for coming, and I'll see you next week.